Welcome to Table Variables Part 2. And in Part 1, we started creating a table variable, and we talked about them a little bit, and we ended right exactly where you see this flashing cursor right down here, and we're going to pick up right there. If you remember in Part 1, we declared our table variable right here, and as we ended Part 1, we were creating our insert statement. We're going to insert some rows into our table variable, and we're going to insert them using a select statement here that's actually a join statement. And so we're up to our second table here and going to alias that as SOH for sales order header. Now, how are we going to join these two tables? We're going to join them on a couple of columns here. In the person table, it's business entity ID, and I'll just grab that so you don't have to watch me try to type that thing. And we want to join them where the business entity ID in the person table is equal to, from the SOH or the sales order header table, the salesperson ID field. They've got two different names and two different tables for those columns, but they're storing the same information or the same data. And then what we're going to do is, because we use this sum right here, because I want to see a sum of all the totals, we're going to group by the first and last name. So we're going to kind of start to pull together all the stuff that we've been learning throughout the course. And this is kind of the way the real world is. You pull out every trick you can think of and locate and find to make this stuff happen. Now notice I'm going to run this select statement that we're using to load our table to show you what we're going to get back. Notice we're getting the first and last name. We don't have a column name on either of these. We'll go alias that right now. But this is showing, this is that count column. This is the number of orders that Syed Abbas had. And this is the total of all of his orders. So this is that sum. So what I'm going to do is make that go away. And let's go back here, and on count, we'll just put number orders. And then over here on sum, we will just alias that as totals. Now let's go run that one more time so that you can see what I just did. And pardon me for making that jump around, but now you can see it a little better. So we'll execute it, and notice there's a number of orders, and I'll make that a little wider, and that's the totals right there. Now let's actually use this data, okay? Because let's go back. Let me make all this go away. We created our variable, the @MTL table variable. We inserted into @MTL, the table variable, into these four columns, the results of this join query. Notice in that join query, we're using group bys and we're using sums. We're doing some pretty neat stuff here. And so now let's see how we would use this table variable that we have created and loaded. So we're going to do a select asterisk from @MTL. And I will run this first just to show you. Now, if I try to run this, I'm going to get an error. It's going to say, you're going to have to declare that one, dude, because I don't see an @MTL out there. And I'm going to get the same problem if I try to run this insert statement, right? Because it's going to say, not sure what you're talking about. I don't see one. So what I'm going to have to do is make sure nothing is highlighted, okay? And that is going to run all of this. Or I could just highlight all of this. Either way. All right, well, I'm going to make sure nothing's highlighted. When I execute, it's going to run this, then it's going to run the insert, then it's going to select from @MTL. So I'll execute it, and notice my result set. It has gone through, it grabbed this, it created the MTL, it loaded the MTL, and then it selected all the columns from MTL, and here's the result set right here. Now let's make this a little more interesting. This is kind of random numbers here. Let's go back and add an order by. Order by orders. Notice that's a table that's in our derived table. And let's make it descending. And so we'll not select anything so that all of it will run together as a batch. We'll execute it. And now notice the order totals is in descending order. So as we scroll down, you can see they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. This is 826,417. This is 195,529. This is how to use a table variable. Now, again, you got to be careful with these because it writes it really quickly. This is very simple to follow. I love these things when I'm doing reports because I can go in and leave little select statements and see exactly what's going on as I'm moving through. I can collect data, kind of stick it into a table variable, massage it. I can create multiple table variables, join them together, sum them, group them, do all that magic to them, and still be able to do selects from them as I move down through there so that I can go through it with my client. I've done this many times, sitting in the conference room with the local administrators or DBAs or whatever and saying, okay, now notice we're pulling this data to here. Then these are the totals we're getting. We're pulling it to here. Here it is by groups. And we'll usually pull a subject matter expert in that knows the data out there, that works with these tables every day, that knows the business. And they'll say, yeah, that looks good. Those numbers look right. Those numbers look right. And when we finally get it boiled down to the result set that actually feeds a report or whatever, we know we have our data right. These things are excellent at that, but make sure you don't let your table variables get too large. They're not very efficient for the way the SQL Server Query Optimizer works with these things. So anyway, that's a real simple example of using table variables.